What I was trying to do. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to today's DigiClass seminar. Our seminar for today will be delivered by Emma Bridges, which is our own Institute of Classical Studies Public Engagement Fellow, and Millington from King's College London. But before we start, I want to introduce the next seminar that will be not broadcast on YouTube. So if you want to attend it, you must come and visit us in Senate House in Malet Street. And the next seminar will be a short presentation about digital classics done by the students, the digital classics students, and they will present their research project and will be very happy to receive some constructive feedback about their work. But now I'm handing it over to Emma and Claire. They will talk about the WCC Wiki, editing Wikipedia with the Women's Classical Committee UK. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you. Hi, hoping everybody can hear. And thank you for inviting us today to talk about the Women's Classical Committee Wikipedia project, which is better known on Twitter as #WCCWiki, and that's easier to read, I think, than to say. It's a project that Emma and I set up with Victoria Leonard and others in the Women's Classical Committee to increase the visibility of female scholars, past and present, on Wikipedia. We're going to talk about some of the things we've learnt and hope this will be helpful to others, in particular, the aspect of Wikipedia as a powerful tool for sharing expertise and collaborating with others, and offering models to consider for digital humanities projects. Before we start, though, properly, can I just ask in the room who ever reads Wikipedia? Just a show of hands. And who in the room edits Wikipedia? Okay, that's not bad. I'm kind of maybe adding to my objectives for this, recruit people to the project. Okay. I'll hand over now to Emma, who will give an overview of Wikipedia and also talk around the issues about representation, particularly of women on the encyclopedia.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks very much for having us as well. Thanks for the invitation. So you may or may not be aware that Wikipedia is basically the world's largest source of knowledge. It has over 40 million articles in over 300 languages, and it's the internet's most visited source of information. So there's a huge potential there for the democratization of knowledge. It works by crowdsourcing content. Editors tend to be just interested volunteers who make contributions on varying scales. So some people just make tiny edits. Some people have worked on many thousands of pages. It's basically a good way of harnessing the public's time and expertise to create a vast digital resource. So think about how often you carry out a generic internet search and the very first result that comes up is something from Wikipedia. You might well scroll past that if you're looking for something academic, but actually, if you think for how many people that first page is the only thing they see about that particular topic, then you get some sense of the power of that as a source of information, and also the kind of importance that the information is accurate, unbiased, and fully representative. So that's a really good reason why academics should get involved in editing, and Claire's going to talk a little bit more about that later as well. The other thing about that is that being represented on Wikipedia can be a really important way of increasing the visibility and the representation online of certain groups or individuals with certain characteristics, and that's something that our project is trying to do in our own little corner of Wikipedia. So a few statistics. These are statistics for English language Wikipedia, because that's the one that we primarily work with. We do have some editors on the project who edit in other languages, but mainly this is what we're most familiar with. So obviously the statistics are different for different languages. So as of now, there are almost 5.7 million articles. Around 600 new articles are created every day, and there's an average of over 10 edits made per second. It has lots of advantages as a way of, as I said, democratizing knowledge. It's free to edit and free to use. It's very easy to learn how to edit it. You don't need any prior expertise in coding. There are two different interfaces. You can use the one that uses code, but there's also a WYSIWYG interface where it just looks like it does on the page. So if you're familiar with editing anything like WordPress, it's basically, it looks as it will appear, the final edited version. It's really quick to do. You get instant results. So when you've made a change, you just hit publish and it goes up. And anyone with an internet connection can access it. But there is there's an important point of accessibility there, which does relate to representation. So, for example, the global north is far better represented among the editing population than the global south. And that's to do with distribution of access to internet. And it's also worth remembering that censorship of Wikipedia does still exist in several countries as well. So just briefly, a few key points to think about guidelines if you do edit Wikipedia or you've not done it before and you'd like to have a go. Wikipedia is hugely invested in ensuring that its information is reliable and, importantly, traceable. So one of the very first rules is it's not a place for sharing original research. Now, that's something that might run a bit counter to the instincts of some academics when we're used to publishing our own research in a new way. But what it really means here is simply, again, a practice that is quite familiar to academics, is that every entry should be fully referenced. There should be citations which relate to information that's been published in reliable sources. Now, those sources could be web-based or they could be in print, but the important thing is that they need following up. If you make an edit and you refer to something, but then don't give a specific reference for it, you can be sure that very soon another editor will come along and flag it and say, actually, we need a proper reference for this. So editors do come along and check pages for omissions and that sort of thing. In addition to that, articles should represent a neutral point of view. That is, they should represent fairly and without editorial bias all significant views that have been published by reliable sources on a topic. Now, that sounds like quite a challenge to achieve, but it is a key part of the way Wikipedia works. Articles that are strongly biased in one direction will again be flagged as problematic. So this is all well and good. The other things that we need to think about as well is that, and again, I think Claire will talk a little bit about this as well, topics and individuals should meet the site's notability criteria, and there are quite strict guidelines about what is a notable topic or individual, say for a biography. We deal mostly with biographies, and so if we're editing pages representing academics, one really good criterion for notability is if someone is a professor. It's very hard to argue that they shouldn't be on Wikipedia. A lot of them aren't, and that's often to do with gender. So this idea about the democratization of knowledge is all well and good. It's great that almost anyone can edit Wikipedia, but that doesn't mean that everybody does, and that produces some particular issues in terms of how things are represented and who and what's represented. So these are the dominant characteristics of the people who edit Wikipedia. This is an article from Wikipedia's own, or a section of Wikipedia's own article on systemic bias. And so the average Wikipedian, so the average person who edits Wikipedia, is male, formally educated, an English speaker, age 15 to 49, and so on. So there are certain characteristics which really predominate among the editing population. That can lead to bias in relation to things like gender, race, social class, and it can also lead to a tendency to underrepresent perspectives of people who don't have access to the internet or don't have the free time to edit as well. The issue which we at the Women's Classical Committee are aiming to tackle, as you probably guessed from our title, is that is that of the encyclopedia's gender imbalance. The statistics vary on this, and it depends on the way that the information is being gathered, but however you look at it, the statistics aren't great. It seems that between only 9 and 16% of Wikipedia editors are actually women. And of all the biographies on the English language Wikipedia, approximately 18% are of women. It's probably not that easy to see this graphic here, but this is a recent screenshot from the Wikidata Human Gender Indicators website, which is really worth going and having a look at. If you see the little dot at the top, that's percentage of English on the English language Wikipedia, percentage of female biographies. You can play around with that. It tells you things like how many edits were made in the last week, and it's worth having a look at that page and a play around if you're interested in the stats. But it's not just about numbers and statistics, it's also to do with content and the ways in which women on Wikipedia are written about. We tend to find that women are overlooked in narratives, or references to notable women are made in relation only to their husband or other male relatives. So, for example, a really good example from our project is that when we started, Miriam Griffin, who is incredibly notable within the classics community and has had an enormous amount of influence with her scholarship, was only mentioned on Wikipedia on the page of her husband, who was also a classical scholar. She now has a page of her own, thanks to the WCC project. We also get things like adult women being referred to as girls or ladies, man being used as the default description of humans. We get descriptive accounts where women are referred to simply as the women rather than in relation to their actual roles or titles. So, you know, things like instead of referring to the committee or the founders, they are just referred to as the women. And published work by women is much less likely to be cited on Wikipedia than that written by men. So one thing we do is add articles to bibliographies, as well as creating pages of biographies of women as well. So tackling these issues can involve sort of trying to do something about those oversights, as well as creating more biographies. So I am going to hand over shortly to Claire to talk about the origins and organisation of the project. But meanwhile, do you want to talk about the slide, Claire?
Yeah, this is research done by people in linguistics disciplines, so I don't want to go too much into the details of the tools used, because it took me a while to sort of pass through to try to understand it myself. But broadly, these are the words in Wikipedia that they've analysed using this tool to find that are most associated with women, that are on the left, and most associated with men on the right. The depth of the colour relates to the strength of the association, and the size of the font relates to the text. So it just gives a quite nice view of this is what women look like on Wikipedia, and this is what men look like on Wikipedia from the corpus of English language articles as a whole.
It's quite interesting, the fact that husband is quite large on the women's.
I was trying to find why. There's actually university I noticed in it's a high frequency but a low association with men on the right hand side, if you can see at the top. Sort of more or less centre at the top.
Right, yeah.
But I was trying to find it on women, and I think I maybe need the opticians, but my eyesight cannot find it anywhere.
Wow, yeah.
So there's the thought. Right.
Okay, so over to you, Claire.
Right, thank you, Emma. Okay, as you may have guessed, WCC Wiki is an overtly feminist project. It comes out of a combination of work that I started before my PhD and a push by the UK Women's Classical Committee towards engaging with Wikipedia. And if I go my slides, how do I do my next one? That one. Sorry, go for it. Right, great. I'd already run a training day and a editathon with support from Wikimedia UK and the ICS focusing on women as classical scholars. And this was informed by a conference I participated in at KCL, and editathons with similar aims in respect of women in archaeology, geology, paleontology and Egyptology at the Natural History and the Petrie Museums. So those are Natural History, Petrie Museum and us here at the ICS. And I was thinking about how to put this work on a more sustainable footing, and at the same time how to reduce and manage the workload involved, as for me, adding the minimum possible to others and my own workloads, and making sure that people's time is valued is a firm feminist principle. The project, as I see it, has several objectives and a related ethos to cohere around, and an open number of ways in which people can involve themselves. And so it's aiming in a very practical way to be inclusive, although as with Wikipedia itself, that should remain a work in progress and always require thought. Our central precepts are that WCC Wiki is entirely voluntary, it should be supportive, collaborative and open in terms of who can participate, and it must offer valuable things that take little time and energy and don't need any regular commitment or fixed participation times or locations. The main activities relate to training and supporting women to become Wikipedia editors and creating and improving pages about women who are classicists. And we also have to find ways of doing this in this sort of relaxed way, but it also has to have energy and momentum and be participant-led, as Wikipedia is itself. Now, having drawn up these ideas with others in the WCC, Emma and I launched the project with a training editathon at the ICS in January last year, again with the support of Wikimedia. And at this, we asked participants what they thought might work, and we agreed that an online 2-hour slot on the same day each month would be easy to remember, achievable, and that 1 to 3 p.m. was probably the best time for people to be able to drop in. Picking a day rather than a date, picking a date rather than a day of the week means that the day will change, which also means that it rolls around a bit and more people are probably able to take part. And having it at 1 till 3 means you can have a sandwich and it's a little bit sociable. The time slot also is somewhat accessible to people in the East Coast American time zones, as we're mostly editing English language pages, although we do, as Emma said, have European language speakers in the project, and there is a need for Wikipedia to have more contact in diverse languages. So what have we done? Since then, we've had an editing session each month since, apart from August last year, because feminist principle, we need time off. We held a regular second training editathon in Manchester in September last year, and we tied in our regular editing sessions to a small side session at the CA, and also joined the Medieval Women in March at their editathon, as well as holding a couple of multi-centred meetups. All of our events use an online chat channel, and we've used Skype at Sun to make it possible for more people to take part. And we're planning a training editathon in September with Katie Shields, assistants at UCL, and we're talking with the Women's Network of Classical Association of Canada about presenting and training at a similar initiative they're interested in. And we're also doing something at CA and FIAC next year. So we've got, I think that's a reasonably full programme, I hope anyway. And we've achieved 68 new articles. We've improved many more. We've had 7 of our articles featured on Wikipedia's front page by the Did You Know? Been featured in the Times Higher Education Supplement, and are in touch with the range of like-minded Wikipedia project editors such as Women in Red and Danesnet. So this is where we are more or less after about 18 months. The project is very loosely managed by a handful of people, and we do this partly through a Slack channel which anybody involved in the project can join. But Twitter and the project discussion boards are our main communication tools, and the open chat channel, which is up during edit sessions only. This means that we're able to take part in wider conversations about Wikipedia, and it makes us very public. And we're also contacted via the WCC email, although we prefer not to add to that workload, so please get in touch with us via the project discussion board or the Twitter hashtag. This also, again, it's keeping it very visible, very transparent, and very in line with Wikipedia's own ethos. Right, and so we're kind of talking about customization, standardization. This does kind of come to the point where our aims don't always mean that we need to use Wikipedia's own automated tools. For example, to keep track of the pages we're working on, you can do that in an automated fashion, but you can also do that manually, which we do. And so it's working out our own systems for what needs doing. And that's based on the amount of time and energy we have. We estimate that they will need trying to make sure there's something useful that people can do, even if there's only 10 minutes. As Emma's going to show in the tour of the project pages, we've got sort of, if you've got 10 minutes, have a look at these pages or try this. And also putting on the front page of the project each month the work that has been done to make it very visible and very sort of motivating to see how well we're progressing. It's actually probably a good time to hand to you.
Okay. So yeah, we thought it would be helpful to have a little kind of tour of the project page for those who've not had a chance to have a look at it before. And I should say that if there are people who've got experience of running Wikipedia projects or doing editing, and there are things that you think would make our lives easier that we could add to the project page or different ways of organising it, then please do share. We're all ears always.
Yes.
So this is the kind of the front page, and you'll see that we have here basically on the landing page a bit of a kind of ego boost to remind us what we have managed to achieve, because sometimes when there's only a handful of us, it can feel a bit daunting. We've got a very long list of things that need editing and improving. So we just have a kind of list of our outcomes here, and we encourage people to, project members, to kind of add to the lists when they've kind of added a new page or whatever. So there's quite a decent long list there on the landing page. You see at the top there, as Claire mentioned, we have had a mention in the Times Higher. Victoria Leonard wrote a fantastic article sharing this with the wider world, and so again, quite nice to see that, just to remind us that this is getting a bit of visibility out there and having some impact. The aims pages basically are divided into sort of curated lists, usually roughly alphabetically ordered. I get a bit obsessive about putting them in alphabetical order, but not everyone else does. That's maybe just me. And lists of things that kind of, at the top, a few really easy wins. If people have got 5 minutes, you can drop in and add a couple of references. You can add works by women translators to lists of translations on pages referring to ancient texts. You don't have to come in and start by creating an entirely new biography if you haven't got that much time. So we divide our pages for work into things that need minor edits or minor expansion. We try and encourage people to, so as here, to sort of put their name next to an article they're working on, so as to avoid kind of duplicating. But of course, once an article's been created, once it's out in the world, anyone can add to it and edit. So it's just useful to know if someone's, in the process of gathering bibliography on something, for example. Things for major edits and things that need major expansion, but also a huge list of red links, which are the people who members have kind of noticed as being notable who haven't got pages yet on Wikipedia. And as you will see, it's a very, very long list. And we are very grateful for any help if anyone fancies taking on any of that. And at the bottom, a watch list, which shows us things that basically we're happy with, but we just need to keep an eye on them, make sure they're up to date. If someone publishes a new book or gets mentioned in the media, then it's worth keeping an eye on that and adding, and just kind of having a look to see if anyone else has made any edits or done anything to those pages. Our discussion page is fairly kind of obvious what that does, I think. Just somewhere where we kind of flag up issues. So, for example, there's a bit here about just to remind people that not to remove names from lists, because we like to keep an eye on things that we have done. We have conversations here about, if people have flagged up articles that have got particular issues, and various other kind of things that crop up from time to time. So it's just basically a place for all of that stuff to live. Now, we noticed when having a look at the page yesterday that tools and guides and resources have the same information on both pages. So that's something that we need to actually correct. Tools and guides, it's where we kind of keep all our resources. If we find books, bibliographic articles, links to our Dropbox folder where we keep materials, where people can find stuff that they might be working on. And then a bunch of resources to help people get started if they're new to editing Wikipedia. And again, some things specifically about representation on Wikipedia media articles. And then finally, this tab here about our events and workshops. And someone's updated it to our next event. Was that you? Oh, brilliant. Good. Because we looked at that yesterday. One of us needs to sort that out. Thank you, Claire. So here again, just a list of events that we have run, but also details about our next event and some information about the chat channel, which Claire mentioned, which is a thing that when we're doing online editing sessions, we just use as a bit of a kind of support network when we're all working remotely. So I think that's kind of it for the project page. It might be worth just showing you one page that the project has created, just for those who are unfamiliar with what a kind of biographical page might look like. Professor of History Kate Cooper at Royal Holloway didn't have a page, and this has been created and gradually added to by the project, by various people on the project, and also I think from some people outside the project have added some things to this one as well. So just to give you a sense of how it's structured, one really nice thing to do if you are interested in doing this and creating a new page, it's actually really helpful if you can look at the structure of another biographical page and simply copy that structure and then insert your own content, because it saves you kind of having to work out how to put it all together. So quite useful. You see at the bottom, really key to this is a list of academic publications and bibliography for this person. That all adds to demonstrating someone's notability and their scholarly contribution. And also here, on this one, we've got a list of media appearances. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily apply to every scholar. The photograph's an interesting kind of point to think about as well, because we do tend to find that articles with photographs seem to get more interest,
Yes.
But sourcing photos can be quite hard, particularly photos of living subjects. Sometimes it's, well, actually, it can be hard regardless of the subject, can't it?
It's about licensing. So
licensing often,
really.
Yeah. So is that something you're going to talk about a little bit in your? Yeah, that. Brilliant. But often, in the case of someone, members have written to people and said, if you've got a photo that you would mind releasing for us to use on Wikipedia, that sort of, that kind of comes up. How are we doing for time? Have I got time just to show people the edit page? Okay. So again, I know some of you will be familiar with this already, so I'm not going to spend a long time on it. And if it is something that you're interested in, how to go about editing, then please talk to us or come to the next online session or the event at UCL in September. So if you click on the edit button, there are two ways of doing it. This is the one that looks kind of, if you're not kind of au fait with code, I'm sure probably most digital people in the room probably are not scared by that, like I was when I first saw it. So, however, if that does feel a bit kind of, oh, I'm not really sure what that is, there is a visual editor, which also looks, that's the WYSIWYG. So basically what you see is exactly what you get, and you can edit directly into that. So again, if you're familiar with using something like WordPress, it feels quite intuitive. There are certain things that you can't do with this particular part of the interface and that you do need to use the code for. But that's basically sort of, I find this quite user-friendly to be able to do it, and it's really easy to make quick edits without having to worry about whether you've got the right code for italics or whatever. One final thing, I guess, if you are interested in looking at who else has been adding or changing things, you can see the revision history, and you can compare particular revision to see what people have done. That's particularly useful if, say, something is being flagged because it's not meeting notability criteria, to see what's been taken out, what's been changed, what else could be added in, so on and so forth. So that is a really quick whistle-stop tour of the page. But as I say, if this is something that people are interested in, then either get in touch with us directly or come to one of our events. And there are always people on hand to help advise what to do. So I think that's me. So back to you.
Back to me.
Claire. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Do you want the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go. Right. So we've very much followed the model set by lots of digital and humanities work in that our practice evolves and we learn by doing things. There's an overwhelming amount of information about Wikipedia and best practice on many areas related to Wikipedia, such as accessibility. So this is a realistic rather than a perfect approach, which would be rather over-daunting. That said, Wikipedia does have policies and guidance that we need to work within, as Emma's touched on, and you do need to make yourself familiar with the main policies and guidance, because this is what the integrity of Wikipedia itself rests on. You can find them through the About section of Wikipedia, and we've also added some of the ones that we think are most relevant to our project's resource page. And some of these are about the null prime research, citing relevant reliable sources, avoiding conflict of interests, how to write about women, which is, there is actually Wikipedia guidance on that, which covers the sorts of things that Emma's talked about, since it was clear that there was a clear need to have this sort of guidance, and also about writing about living people and some of the particular issues that arise with that. It may seem a bit bureaucratic, but to be honest, most of them parallel the requirements of academia anyway, like the reliable sources and abiding by rules of conflict of interest. So as Emma said, it's a bit different in that it's not a place for primary research. This does actually cause a difficulty when you look writing about women, because if people haven't written the secondary material, what do we refer to? And that is something that does come up, and we do sometimes find that somebody has flagged our pages too much reliance on primary research. That when you're actually just putting things together from that, sometimes you just look at it and you think this is just people being over picky with a woman's biography, and sometimes you look at it and you think you try and sort of work with it a bit more. So if you are, this is really a bit of a plea that if you are writing for publications, particularly online ones, try and get a chance to address this balance bit, please do it.
Then we can cite it on here.
We can cite it on here, and your work will get a bit more visibility as well. So yes, I mean, one of the things that we probably want to do with the project in the mid to near future is to get a bit more involved with the standards and guidance of Wikipedia itself, to try to see if we can make some of that a bit more sensible sometimes. Right, so yes, and if you stick to the standards bit, it's easier when you come to deal with the Sheldon Coopers of Wikipedia, because they do exist. Pardon?
What does that mean?
What the Sheldon Cooper, sorry, he's a character on the Big Bang Theory, who is, it's a TV program. Apologies if you've not. Okay, moving on. We focused a lot on the positive aspects of Wikipedia, and one of the things that I think is underused is that its potential for being a teaching tool. Lots of the skills such as source criticism, citation, academic writing, critical thinking, they're very similar to academia. And there have been successful projects run with students, such as one at the University of Portsmouth's Geography department called Telling the Stories of Rural England with Wikipedia. And this looked at giving students substantial experience of using census data and of referencing to understand the numbers associated with the place, and for them to be able to interpret what it means for the people that live there. And this research by Kirishi, which I can give you the reference for afterwards, also into sort of using it within academia. We've also got some preoccupations at the moment. We focus a lot on the positive aspects because Wikipedia is an important entity and worth working with, and we've also outlined some of the problems. The things that are occupying our attention at the moment a bit are things like categories, which has cropped up on the project's discussion board. As a category called Women Classical Scholars, was created by an editor with good intentions, and arguments made for it left on our project discussion board. What happens with categories is that they group pages, and they usually should have their pages moved down through a tree structure to end up with useful groups at the bottom, so that you can find, rather than being an amorphous mass, you can quite easily find relevant pages. You can see that can be useful. In the case of classical scholars, the subcategorizations occur by nationality, institution, and discipline, so you can find people working on a particular again, useful. However, it can also create problems with ghettoization. And for gender, as with race, sexuality, and other characteristics that do not relate to why somebody is notable enough to have an encyclopedia entry, this has caused problems. And one good example was the removal of women from the category of American novelists for their own separate category of American women novelists. Now, this provoked a New York article in 2013, after which there was a hasty clarification put under guidance for categories that says that in almost all cases, gendered, ethnic, sexuality, religion-based categories should be non-diffusing, meaning that membership in the category should not remove membership from the non-gendered, non-ethnic, etc. parent category. Now, having two types of category is sort of useful, because you do get things like being able to put Roman women for example, by century, there are actually some quite useful lists of those that is a category. So you've got first century Roman women, second century. I deal with Roman women. That's quite useful to me, and I'm sure there are many other less kind of self-centered examples. But it does create confusion, and I'm not entirely convinced of the value of this. And it's these sorts of things take up the time and energy that we're trying to very carefully preserve for things that are actually our aims. Images are slightly different. As Emma said, they take time. It's a bit frustrating because the licensing requirements for Wikipedia mean that they need to be available for all purposes, including commercial ones under the Creative Commons license. And you also have to be able to point very clearly, if you're not the originator of an image, to where that permission has been given. So, for example, Helen Maria Chestnut, who's I've been in touch with Michael Valerie Ronick and the Smith Archive, who said, yes, fine, use the picture, but it's on an email and I can't point to that. So I'm trying to find a way of having that sort of a bit more public where that permission is, or ideally to have the archive upload it themselves. And that. So I think that's pretty much it. So there's the kind of the more positive elements and then some of the preoccupations we've got at the moment with the project.
Okay. So that's kind of it from us, but we'd really welcome some questions and suggestions and your thoughts on any of this. We'd also, as Claire said, really like you to join us if you're interested in what we're doing. You can find us by looking for our project page. If you enter Wikipedia Women's Classical Committee into the search box, you will find us. You can also find both of us on Twitter, as well as Women in Classics, and search via the hashtag WCCWiki, which is a good way of keeping up. People normally tweet that if they've created a new article, for example, but also, yeah, good way to get hold of us. Come to our events and talk to us about it.
Yeah, I think on that, just to say, if you want to come and be trained, you don't have to have a desire to work on the project pages in the longer term. If you want to come and do it so that you can work on other areas that are your particular academic interests, we're very happy to do that. And if you're a guy wanting to work on women's pages, we're also very happy to train you to do that too.
And also you can work on the pages by not doing it when we're running a session. Anyone can, if you see things that need doing, then anytime, you don't have to wait for us to be running something to get involved. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma and Claire. I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the audience. I'm gonna maybe start with one and we can record your answer and then we will stop the broadcast and everyone can ask all the most embarrassing questions. So my question is, I've noticed and I've read that female scholars in classics, as in other disciplines, tend to be cited less than their male colleagues. And I wanted to ask you if you have any data or if you anticipate or just hope that the work that you're doing might have, the side effect of also, improving the number of citations for women scholars?
That's a really good question. I don't know how I'm not sure we have any data that can prove the link between what we're doing, but it would be really interesting to think about how we could do that.
It would be interesting, and I wonder if there's something within Wikimedia's metrics that
could suggest
allow us to find that out.
Because certainly one of the things that we do try and do is encourage people to look at pages on which they have some expertise, have a look at the bibliography, and go through and kind of add anything that's missing. It doesn't have to be just work by women scholars, obviously, but that is something that's useful to do. Another thing that we've done is gone through, and we've been compiling a list of translations of ancient texts by women, and I can't remember how many we ended up with, 100 or more, or very few of them were actually on the pages for the subjects. And so again, we've been through and added lots of those. But yeah, if you've got any suggestions as to how we could actually track whether this has any effect on citations,
I'll think about it. But yeah, I would be really happy to see that that is happening thanks to this to this work that you're doing.
Sure.
Okay. So let's say goodbye to our friends that are following us on YouTube. Sharing and